Hi there, fellow classmates. My name is Barbie Yakolavich, and I am a teacher of the visually impaired here in Ocala, Florida. Welcome to my classroom for today. I want to thank my husband for providing this awesome backdrop. He's an avid Star Wars fan and collector, obviously. And I want to thank my son Joey, who's been so helpful to me. He's my tech support, helped me with the PowerPoint. He's my producer, current videographer. Jojo, say hello to the gang.
Hey.
And he's just an all-around encourager. So today, my assignment is to teach you guys about Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. So in our lesson today, first I'm going to give you a little biography about Erikson, then an explanation of his 8 stages of psychosocial development. And then I'm going to have you guys do a quick pair share to chat with your neighbor or jot down on a piece of paper some ideas that you think will help you in your classroom from the information that you've learned today. And then the last segment is educational implications that you'll be able to incorporate in your classroom. So I have a little mini PowerPoint here. Just pretend that it's a giant smartboard. And Joey's going to zoom in on it occasionally so you can see what's there. And we'll get started. So, Erik Erikson, he was rocking the 90s, best known for his famous theory of psychosocial development and the concept of an identity crisis. His theories marked an important shift in thinking on personality. Instead of focusing simply on early childhood events, but his psychosocial theory looks at how social influences contribute to our personalities throughout our entire lifespans. Erik Erikson, he was born in 1902 in Frankfurt, Germany. He had kind of an interesting childhood. His young Jewish mother raised Erik by herself for a time before she married a physician. His name was Dr. Theodor Hamburger. And the fact that Hamburger was not, in fact, his biological father, that was concealed from him for many years. And when Erikson finally did learn that Hamburger was not his father, he was left with a feeling of confusion about who he really was. This is a little clip from his obituary. It says, "The common story was that his mother and father had separated before his birth, but the closely guarded fact was that he was his mother's child from an extramarital union. He never saw his birth father or his mother's first husband." So that was from his obituary. So this early experience that Erikson had helped spark his interest in the formation of identity. And while it might seem like an interesting story about his life, the mystery over Erikson's biological parentage served as one of the key forces behind his later interest in the identity formation. He would later explain that as a child he often felt confused about who he was and how he fit into his community. His interest in identity was further developed based on his own experiences in school. At his Jewish temple school, he was teased for being tall, blue-eyed, blonde, Nordic-looking boy who stood out from the rest of the kids. And then at grammar school, he was rejected because of his Jewish background. These early experiences helped fuel his interest in identity formation and continued to influence his work throughout life. Erikson never received a formal degree in medicine or in psychology. He met a Canadian dance instructor named Joan, who was also teaching at a school where he worked. The couple married in 1930 and had 3 children. Erikson moved to the United States in 1933, and despite having no formal degree, he was offered a teaching position at Harvard Medical School. And he also changed his name from Erik Hamburger to Erik H. Erikson, perhaps as a way to forge his own identity. Later, he held teaching positions at the University of California at Berkeley, Yale, San Francisco Psychoanalytic Institute, Austin Riggs Center, and the Center for Advanced Studies of the Behavioral Sciences. He published a number of books on his theories and research, including Childhood in Society, The Life Cycle Completed, and his book, Gandhi's Truth, was awarded a Pulitzer Prize and a National Book Award. So let's get into the stages now. My hubby just got home. Hi, babe. We're recording right now. I told him about your cool room.
Great.
Okay, Erikson's theory of psychosocial development has 8 distinct stages. Here you'll see them circularly and listed there. 5 of the stages are for 18-year-olds and under, and then 3 of them are for beyond 18, well into adulthood. Like Freud and many others, Erikson maintained that personality develops in a predetermined order and builds upon each stage. During each stage, the person experiences a psychosocial crisis, which could have a positive or negative outcome for personality development. For Erikson, these crises are of a psychosocial nature because they involve the psychological needs of the individual conflicting with the needs of society, the social. According to the theory, successful completions of each stage results in a healthy personality and the acquisition of basic virtues. Basic virtues are characteristic strengths which the ego can use to resolve subsequent crises. Failure to successfully complete a stage can result in a reduced ability to complete further stages, and therefore a more unhealthy personality and sense of self. These stages, however, can be resolved successfully at a later time. So if you don't get it right in the early years, you can make up for it later. So now we're going to break it down a little bit further, and we'll walk through each stage of development. Here is the first one, trust versus mistrust. You'll see with each one there's a versus. It's like a crisis, figuring out which way are things going to go. So as that newborn comes into the world, is the world a safe place, or is it full of unpredictable events and accidents waiting to happen? Erikson's first psychosocial crisis occurs during the first year of life. The crisis is one of trust versus mistrust. During this stage, the infant is uncertain about the world in which they live. To resolve these feelings of uncertainty, the infant looks towards their primary caregiver for stability and consistency of care. If the care that the infant receives is consistent, predictable, and reliable, they will develop a sense of trust, which will carry with them to other relationships, and they'll be able to feel secure even when threatened. Success on this stage will lead to the virtue of hope. By developing a sense of trust, the infant can have hope that as new crises arise, there's a real possibility that other people will be there as a source of support. Failing to acquire the virtue of hope will lead to the development of fear. For example, if the care has been harsh or inconsistent, unpredictable, and unreliable, then the infant will develop a sense of mistrust and will not have confidence in the world around him or in their abilities to influence events. This infant will carry the basic sense of mistrust with them into other relationships. It may result in anxiety, heightened insecurities, and an overall feeling of mistrust in the world around them. So now we'll move to our second stage. This one's called autonomy versus shame and doubt. Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, this is the second stage, and this stage occurs between the ages of 18 months to approximately 3 years old. The child is developing physically and becoming more mobile. and discovering that he or she has many skills and abilities, such as putting on clothes and shoes, playing with toys, etc. Such skills illustrate the child's growing sense of independence and autonomy. For example, during this stage, the children begin to assert their independence by walking away from their mother, picking which toy to play with, and making choices about what they like to wear and eat. Erikson states that it is critical that parents allow their children to explore the limits of their abilities within an encouraging environment, which is tolerant of failure. For example, rather than put on a child's clothes, a supportive parent should have the patience to allow the child to try until they succeed or they ask for assistance. So the parents need to encourage the child to become more independent while at the same time protecting the child so that constant failure is avoided. A delicate balance is required from the parent. They must not try to do everything for the child, but if the child fails at a particular task, they must not criticize the child for failures and accidents, particularly when toilet training. The aim has to be self-control without a loss of self-esteem. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of will. If children in this stage are encouraged and supported, increased independence, they become more confident and secure in their own ability to survive in the world. If children are criticized, overly controlled, or not given the opportunity to assert themselves, they begin to feel inadequate in their ability to survive, and they may become overly dependent upon others, lack self-esteem, and feel a sense of shame or doubt in their abilities. Okay, if any of you are preschool teachers, this is where you need to tune in. This stage is called initiative versus guilt, the third stage. During this stage, children assert themselves more frequently. These are particularly lively, rapid developing years in a child's life. During this period, the primary feature involves the child regularly interacting with other children. Central to this stage is play. Children begin to plan activities, make up games, and initiate activities with others. If given this opportunity, children develop a sense of initiative and feel secure in their ability to lead others and to make decisions. Conversely, if this tendency is squelched, either through criticism or control, children develop a sense of guilt. They may feel like a nuisance to others and will therefore remain followers, lacking in self-initiative. The child takes initiative, which the parents will often try to stop in order to protect the child. The child will often overstep the mark in his forcefulness, and the danger is that the parents will tend to punish the child and restrict his initiatives too much. It's at this stage that the child will begin to ask many questions, and his thirst for knowledge grows. If the parents treat the child's questions as trivial, a nuisance or embarrassing, or other aspects of their behavior as threatening, the child may have feelings of guilt for being a nuisance. Too much guilt can make the child slow to interact with others and may inhibit their creativity. Some guilt, of course, is necessary, otherwise the child would not know how to exercise self-control or have a conscience. A healthy balance between initiative and guilt is important. Success at this stage will lead to the virtue of purpose. All right, now for you elementary school teachers, we have industry versus inferiority. Erikson's fourth stage, industry versus inferiority, occurs during childhood between the ages of 6 and 12. Children are at the stage where they'll be learning to read and write, to do sums, to do things on their own. Teachers begin to play an important role in the students' lives. As they teach them these skills, it's at this stage that the child's peer group will gain greater significance and will become a major source of the child's self-esteem. The child now feels the need to win approval by demonstrating specific competencies that are valued by society and begin to develop a sense of pride in their accomplishments. If children are encouraged or reinforced for their initiative, they begin to feel industrious or competent and feel confident in their ability to achieve their goals. If this initiative is not encouraged, if it's restricted by parents or teacher, then the child begins to feel inferior, doubting his own abilities, and therefore may not reach his or her potential. If the child cannot develop the specific skill they feel society is demanding, like being athletic or musical, they may develop a sense of inferiority. Some failure may be necessary so the child can develop some modesty. Again, a balance between competence and modesty is necessary. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of competence. So now we move to adolescence, middle and high school. Identity versus role confusion. During adolescence, the transition from childhood to adulthood is most important. Children are becoming more independent and begin to look at the future in terms of career, relationships, families, housing, etc. The individual wants to belong to a society and fit in. The fifth stage, identity versus role confusion. It occurs during adolescence from about 12 to 18 years old. During this stage, adolescents search for a sense of self and personal identity. The adolescent mind is essentially a mind or moratorium, a psychosocial stage between childhood and adulthood, and between the morality learned by the child and the ethics to be developed by the adult. This is a major stage of development where the child has to learn the role he will occupy as an adult. It's during this stage that the adolescent will re-examine his identity and try to find out exactly who he or she is. Erikson suggests that two identities are involved, the sexual and the occupational. During this stage, the body image of the adolescent changes. Erikson claims that the adolescent may feel uncomfortable about their body, well, until they can adapt and grow into the changes. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of fidelity. Fidelity involves being able to commit oneself to others on the basis of accepting others, even where there might be ideological differences. During this period, they explore possibilities and begin to form their own identity based on the outcome of their explorations. Failure to establish a sense of identity within society can lead to some role confusion. Role confusion involves the individual not being sure about themselves or their place in society. So now we move to intimacy versus isolation. This is the sixth stage of Erikson's theory. This stage takes place during young adulthood, between the ages of approximately 18 and 40 years. During this period, the major conflict centers on forming intimate, loving relationships with other people. During this period, we begin to share ourselves more intimately with others. We explore relationships leading towards longer-term commitments with someone other than a family member. Successful completion of this stage can result in happy relationships and a sense of commitment, safety, and care within a relationship. Avoiding intimacy, fearing commitment and relationship can lead to isolation, loneliness, and sometimes depression. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of love. Stage 7, generativity versus stagnation. This is the 7th of the 8 stages. This stage takes place during the middle adulthood ages 40 to 65. Woo woo. Generativity refers to making your mark on the world through creating or nurturing things that will outlast the individual. People experience a need to create or nurture things that will outlast them, often having mentees or creating positive changes that will benefit other people. We give back through society by raising our children, being productive at work, and becoming involved in our community. Through generativity, we develop a sense of being a part of a bigger picture. Success leads to feelings of usefulness and accomplishment, while failure results in shallow involvement in the world. By failing to find a way to contribute, we become stagnant and feel unproductive. These individuals may feel disconnected or uninvolved with their community and with society as a whole. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of care. And our final stage, ego integrity versus despair. Ego integrity versus despair is the 8th and final stage. This stage begins at approximately 65 years of age and ends at death. As we grow older and become senior citizens, we tend to slow down our productivity and explore life as a retired person. It's during this time that we can contemplate our accomplishments and can develop integrity if we see ourselves as leading a successful life. Erikson described ego integrity as the acceptance of one's one and only life cycle as something that had to be. Erikson believed if we see our lives as unproductive, feel guilt about our past, or feel that we did not accomplish our life goals, we become dissatisfied with life and develop despair, often leading to depression and hopelessness. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of wisdom. Wisdom enables a person to look back at their life with a sense of closure and completeness, and also accept death without fear. Wise people are not characterized by a continuous state of ego integrity, but they experience both ego integrity and despair. Thus, late life is characterized by both ego integrity and despair as alternating states that need to be balanced. So our next section, this is just a little critical evaluation showing some good and bad, or positive and negative, I should say, aspects of Erikson's theories. I'm just going to let Joey zoom in on that for a minute, and I'm going to tell you, just for the sake of time, we're going to move on and do our pair share. So what I'd like you to do, if you have a buddy there with you, I'd like you to share with your buddy some ideas of what you think you can do in regard to your lesson planning and classroom teaching that might be able to incorporate some of the goals or things that you've learned about as far as Erikson's theory on the psychosocial stages of development. So you can pause the video here if you'd like to do that. If you don't have a partner, you can just jot some things down. But if you have a partner, you can just talk to them about how you think this information can be used in your classroom. So break if you want to break, and we'll just keep going. So now we're going to discuss how this does apply to education. You notice 3 of Erikson's stages occur during childhood and adolescence. So those are the 3 that we're going to focus on for this section. According to Erikson, the key crisis for children between the ages of 3 and 6, those preschool years, is initiative versus guilt. From 6 to 12, elementary school, it's industry versus inferiority. And for teenagers, middle and high school, identity versus role confusion. So first we're going to look at some educational applications for the preschool crowd. So those in the initiative versus guilt stage, they recommend giving children the opportunity to make choices and to act upon those choices, because the crisis of initiative versus guilt determines whether a child learns to plan activities on her own or comes to associate self-directed behavior with punishment. She must have the opportunity to make her own decisions. They recommend providing a portion of the day when children can choose their own activities. Maybe a classroom library where the children can choose their own books. This allows children the opportunity to learn how to make decisions for themselves. They recommend breaking the instruction down into small steps, makes it easier for children to succeed, and encourages them to take risks. And without this framework, children might become frustrated by the activities and sense that they are doomed to complete them poorly. It's also recommended that you ensure that any competitive games or activities have really well-balanced teams. If the children consistently lose at the math games, they may believe that they're bad at math. And conversely, if they are not very good in math, but they're on a team that's winning math games, that will boost their confidence in their own math skills. It's important to let this age group make mistakes that result from attempting activities on their own. It's got to be okay to make those mistakes. If a student damages something or makes a serious error, show them how to fix it, show them how to clean it, show them how to redo it, instead of simply punishing them. And this will make the students feel more confident in their abilities and to attempt to continue to try things on their own. So next group, this is the elementary crowd. That says 8th grade, but it's really 5th grade. Sorry about that. This is the industry versus inferiority section. So here you want to allow these students the opportunity in your classrooms to set realistic goals. Have them create academic goals for each quarter and revisit those goals every few weeks to monitor their progress. You want to break down the assignments into parts so the students can learn how to set time management goals. For instance, instead of collecting all parts of a project at once, collect a brainstorming work on a certain date, maybe a couple weeks later, a rough draft, another week later, a final draft. If a child successfully navigates the crisis of industry versus inferiority, he will enter adolescence with a sense that hard work and perseverance will pay off. If not, he will feel that he is a helpless observer of his life. They encourage assigning jobs to students in this at this stage level. Let them stack chairs, feed class pets, hand out and collect papers, take attendance sheets to the office, rotate those jobs so students all have a chance to participate, and this will give the students a sense of accomplishment. It's important to teach children study skills, explain how to budget their time, keep notebooks and binders, and stay organized. Provide regular feedback for these kiddos, particularly those who seem discouraged. You want to praise them for what they're doing right and give constructive criticism of what they're doing wrong. If your school has a program like Student of the Month, choose students who have academic or behavioral issues but are making strong efforts at improvement as well as high achievers. And this will show them that their efforts are paying off even if they're not making straight A's. And for the middle and high schoolers, identity versus role confusion. Here, for these kiddos, you want to provide a variety of positive role models for these students. Adolescence is a time of discovering one's own identity, and a teenager who successfully navigates the crisis of identity versus role confusion will be able to answer the question, who am I, with confidence. Provide a series of role models to give students a potential identity model. Teach students about women and minorities who succeeded at a variety of careers, so all students have a role model to whom they can relate. And mention individuals who made lesser-known contributions to your academic discipline. A budding poet might feel more kinship with Yvonne Boland than Emily Dickinson. It's also encouraged to provide models of exemplary work so students know what an excellent project looks like and can compare it to their own work to the model. And this will show them how to incorporate academic success into their identities, essentially providing role models for their work instead of their career goals. And you want to provide these students with opportunities to bring their own interests into projects and assessments. They may feel these interests are vital parts of their identities. Allow students to choose between a variety of final projects, skits, essays, art projects, music compositions, etc. So they can either choose a project that appeals to them or explore new aspects of their identities. Criticize behaviors rather than making personal condemnations of the students themselves. Students are trying on roles at this point, and negative feedback for a behavior may encourage them to drop it and try another. Explain that long-term consequences of misbehavior or poor performance so students will know how it affects themselves and others. And this may encourage them to adopt a more responsible identity. And lastly, encourage these students and support their interests. Attend school plays, concerts, games to affirm their identities as actors, musicians, athletes. All right. So how did you do in your pair share? I hope you came up with some of the ideas that we gave while you did your pair share. And I hope you found this lesson helpful. I have a reference page for you if you're interested in any more information on where I received this information. I'll be glad to send you the link. Maybe we could do that through the blog. And lastly, woohoo! Have a great summer! Thanks for listening. Bye.